Starting out as a door-to-door salesman in Cypress Oaks sounded simple, but the rumors painted the neighborhood as different. Apparently, few people managed to make sales there, and not because the residents didn't buy, but because many simply never came back. Or so they said. I never paid much attention to the gossip. I needed the job. Before I left, Thompson, my supervisor, handed me a sheet of paper. There was no motivational speech, no reminder of the sales protocol, just a tense look and the sheet of rules. Read this. Memorize it. If you want to leave Cypress Oaks by the end of the day, you'd better follow them. I laughed, thinking it was some kind of office joke. Thompson didn't smile. Rules for salesmen in Cypress Oaks. 1. If you knock on a door and no one answers, knock only twice. If on the third attempt the door opens by itself, back away and don't enter. It's not an invitation. 2. If you see a small child watching you from a window, avoid eye contact. If they smile at you, change streets immediately. 3. At noon, the sun may appear slightly dim over certain houses. Do not stop in front of them. Don't look at the sky if you notice this. Keep walking and don't run no matter what you hear. 4. If a door opens before you knock, take 3 steps back. If you're invited in, ask, "Are you sure?" If they say yes, ask again. If the answer changes, leave. If it doesn't, don't go in. 5. If you're offered water in a house, check the glass. If the water has dark specks floating in it, excuse yourself and leave. Don't drink. 6. Between 2 o'clock and 3 p.m., the wind may seem stronger on some streets. If you hear a whisper calling your name from behind, do not respond. Under no circumstances should you look back. 7. If a house has more than one front door, choose the one on the far right. If you knock on the wrong one, you'll know immediately, but it will be too late. 8. If you knock on a door and a man whispers your name in response, don't ask how he knows it. Never ask. Just thank him for his time and leave. 9. If your head starts hurting at 4 p.m., stop at the nearest shop. Don't keep working. If there aren't any shops nearby, don't look at your watch. Just wait. I read the rules in disbelief, each more absurd than the last. A haunted neighborhood? Please. But something in Thompson's seriousness unsettled me. It's not real, I repeated to myself. I began my route through Cypress Oaks. The houses were old but well kept, with manicured gardens and tall trees casting heavy shadows. My first potential customer didn't answer the doorbell. I knocked again, then a third time. Suddenly the door creaked open, slowly. I froze. The air inside the house was dark, as if sunlight couldn't penetrate. I heard nothing, no voice, no sound, but I felt something watching me from the threshold. I decided to back away, following the rule. As I walked backward, I heard a soft click, and the door slowly closed in front of me with no visible hand. A chill ran down my spine, but I told myself it was the wind. At the next house, before I reached the door, I saw him. A small child, maybe about 5 years old, standing at a second-floor window. His face was pale, his expression neutral, but his eyes, they were fixed on me, unblinking. So, I looked down, trying to ignore him. But when I instinctively glanced back up, he was still there, and this time he was smiling. My heart raced. I broke the rule. I kept looking. Suddenly, something cracked behind me, like the sound of a branch snapping under invisible weight. I wasn't supposed to look. The child kept smiling, but he wasn't a child anymore. His face seemed to stretch, the smile expanding to the edges of his face, and his eyes were deep, dark pits. I quickly turned and changed streets, but I felt something following me. The sound of small, childish footsteps behind me, always at the same distance. At 2:30 p.m. the wind changed. It felt like the air itself whispered my name, brushing against my ear. I quickened my pace, but the whispers grew clearer, more insistent. Then someone called me by name. Stephen. I kept walking, clenching my fists as the wind swirled around me. I shouldn't turn, I shouldn't. Stephen, come here, it repeated in a tone that made my skin crawl. Without thinking, I turned around. I broke the rule. There was no one behind me, but at the corner of the street, a thin, blurry figure moved toward me. It didn't walk, it didn't run. It floated. The distance between us never seemed to change, but every time I blinked, it was closer. I ran, trying to remember the next rule. I wasn't supposed to run, but it was already too late. I reached a house, desperate for shelter. A normal-looking woman opened the door and invited me in. I remembered the rules, but I was exhausted, my throat dry, my heart pounding. She offered me water, and I almost accepted without checking the glass. I looked just in time. The water had dark specks floating in it, like small bits of something rotten. Suddenly, the liquid shifted on its own, clumping together as if it were alive. Panic crawled up my spine. "Is everything okay?" the woman asked, her smile twisting into impossible angles. I ran for the door, but something cold wrapped around me before I could reach it. The air grew thick and crushing. I heard a crunching sound near my ear, like something biting down, and the pain in my head began to intensify. The shadows started to move. My vision distorted, the lines of the houses bending, as if reality itself was warping under an invisible pressure. The sun, which had once shone brightly, slowly dimmed, its light fading to a sickly gray. My watch read 4 p.m. My head was a pounding drum of pain, but there were no shops nearby. I looked at the watch, breaking the last rule. The pain exploded. It felt as though my skull was being crushed from the inside. An inhuman buzzing filled my ears, and when I tried to scream, the air caught in my lungs. I fell to the ground, and the last thing I saw before darkness consumed me was the child from the window standing over me, his smile widening as his empty eyes drained the last of my consciousness. The final words I heard were a whisper inside my head. "You broke too many rules,